Hi, welcome to another episode of the Mapscaping podcast. My name is Daniel, and this is a podcast for the geospatial community. Today, I've got not one, but two guests for you, Pia and Mike. And we're going to be talking about AI in QGIS. So these guys went through the QGIS plugin library, filtered out really popular plugins, AI plugins, and tested them. And so that's what we're going to be talking today. What did they find out? What is the state of AI in QGIS? So I've been playing around with a lot of large language models. Claude Code is my weapon of choice at the moment. And it is fascinating to watch it work, to do work. And there is a moment in this podcast where one of the guests described typing a request into QGIS in plain English and watching it execute a multi-step geoprocessing workflow automatically. And I got to tell you, this feels a lot like the future. But I'll let Perry and Mike talk more about that in just a second. Hi, gentlemen. Welcome to the Mapscaping podcast. Absolutely a pleasure to have you on today. I think it's one of the first times, or perhaps the first time, I've ever tried to have two guests on at once. So you just have to bear with me here a little bit. Pia, you are a GIS consultant and you have a background in cartography. And Mike, you're also a GIS consultant, a senior GIS consultant. We'll start with you, Pia. Could you just introduce yourself further? Could you put a few more words around that, please? Who are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Appreciate that. My trade is cartography or cartographer. So I started cartography back in the late 90s, beginning of 2000. The reason why I started cartography, because, I grew up in East Berlin. At the time when the wall was still up, I couldn't travel. So we were enclosed. So I realized the best way for me to discover the world is looking at maps and atlases. And that caught my interest. And this is how I became basically a cartographer and started studying cartography. While I was studying cartography, GIS was also becoming more and more popular. And that was just a part of a subject of the study. And a few years later, when I finished cartography, I realized, it's probably a good idea to study GIS on top. So I have also a career in GIS because I realized the combination of GIS, the underlying data, and mapping, they fit nicely together. So yeah, that's basically a rough background of my education, if you like.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mike, how about you? Could you briefly introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. It's great to be here. Yeah, look, I've had probably 20 plus years across many industries that sort of use GIS. I started off in New Zealand, did a graduate diploma at Mass University. This is going back, started in 1999. Finished that diploma, I think, eventually in 2003 after a bit of a stint in China teaching English. Since then, I've worked agriculture, forestry for an engineering design house in Auckland for about 5 years there with Becca. Then moved over to Australia, working in Perth 6.5 years, worked in the resources industry. Over there also worked for the Federal Science Agency, CSIRO, 3 years. Then made a move to Brisbane. Brisbane, I've been working primarily on infrastructure projects, which is, for me, is kind of my sweet spot. There was a 5.5 year stint with Inland Rail, brief stint with Pierre at NGIS, and now I am contracting with a water provider and it also involved in sewage infrastructure, Unity Water, which is out of Moreton Bay, just north of Brisbane. That's me, Dan.
Thank you very much. So it'd be fair to say that you're both seasoned professionals in the geospatial world. I think that would be a fair statement. And the reason why I reached out to you and wanted to talk with you both today is because of a talk that you gave, Pia, at FOSFG 2025 in Auckland. Mike was supposed to be there, but unfortunately couldn't make it. And the talk was all about AI in QGIS. And AI is, as you both know, a big topic these days. I think it's going to be a lot bigger than what it is now, like going forwards. And so this is the topic I was hoping to discuss with you today. Mike, maybe we could go to you first. Why did you guys create this talk? Why did you feel it was necessary to focus on AI in QGIS?
Well, I guess in FOSS4G, QGIS was probably quite a likely candidate to look at in terms of that open source platform. But I think both Pierre and I sort of agreed that AI is obviously influencing every industry, not just GIS. And in terms of probably getting access to AI, QGIS offers probably the easiest pathway in sort of in the GIS world. It was an idea, actually. Look, I don't want to steal it off Pierre. I think Pierre it was his baby, but I was also very excited about that, wanted to be part of that, and it's just, I think as a GIS professional, you've got to be aware that AI and machine learning is really influencing everything about GIS, and it's a wise move to be across that. You run a real risk of losing some key skills if you don't put the effort into to learn what AI is doing in the GIS world. And for me, it's also a real interest area. So it's not something that I'm forcing myself to do. I'm really excited about what I'm seeing with AI. So it was really just something I was very keen to do, and I think Pierre was equally keen.
So, Pierre, it's apparently your baby. I guess after what Mike told us, I guess we have a bit of an understanding of why QGIS. I mean, it's a hugely popular platform, and being a platform, you can stick something into it and you'll reach a lot of people. So this is a great way for people to get access to AI. It's a great way for them to be introduced to AI, especially through the plugin environment in QGIS. But maybe before we jump into all that great stuff, the different plugins that you've looked at and worked with, when we say AI in this conversation, what are we talking about? Because we often throw around the term geo AI. Is this the same thing?
Honestly, that's an interesting question. I guess geo AI is just a subset of AI, I'd say, because I mean, you can use and apply AI to all sorts of different disciplines. And obviously, we as GIS professionals, we use AI in a different way than maybe other professionals. So, yeah, you could argue, I mean, it could be like a geo AI. But when you talk about AI in general, I mean, this is just like an overarching pod of different AI tools, and I'm talking about machine learning, deep learning, and also LLMs we're using pretty much on a daily basis nowadays. So there's obviously a differentiation between the three, because you hear often people talking about, oh yeah, I'm using AI at work, but what they probably mean by that is using maybe an LLM or machine learning rather than AI as such, is it?
Do you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, with what Pierre's saying there, I think the majority of people are using ChatGPT, primarily ChatGPT, and probably Copilot, those large language models. When it comes to GIS, I mean, there are a few plugins for those, but I don't think the actual usage of those tools are pervasive across GIS. Currently, GIS has a beta LLM, I think, GIS Assistant, I think it's called. But probably not across, how many people are actually using that add-on in an Australian context or across the world, really. So I still don't really feel that we are using large language models to the full extent of GIS by a long way.
Yeah, I would agree that I think there's a ton of untapped potential there. But let's start by discussing some of these plugins that you were talking about. You talked us through it in your talk, which I'll link to. It's up on YouTube at Phos4G. But maybe you could run us through some of the plugins that you mentioned there, and that might lead on to a wider discussion around LLMs, I think, in particular, and geospatial work.
So when we started looking at all these different plugins which are available through QGIS, I mean, there's obviously a bunch out there available. And we basically used AI to give us an idea how many plugins are there and what category they fall under. Like I mentioned, machine learning, deep learning, or LLMs, because they all have different purposes and have different features, and you obviously use them in a different way. So, like I said, we used AI and created an interesting graph, and we thought, given that there are so many, and obviously we just had like half an hour to present, and we couldn't touch and test and look at every single plugin out there. So we thought, oh, let's start with the ones that have the most, or at least 10,000 downloads per month. So that was the first starting point, and that gave us a rough idea what the plugins are we could talk about. And then we put them basically in different categories. So we thought, okay, let's discuss at least some that touch on deep learning, there are others that touch on machine learning, and then also the last category, LLMs. This is how we categorize them. And then we basically picked and thought, oh yeah, that might be interesting. This one is maybe interesting. So download them, tested them out, and put them into our presentation. This is basically how we started.
Yeah, cool. Can you tell us about some of the plugins?
The ones that fall under the category machine learning, there was one or a couple of interesting ones, Bunting Labs AI Vectorizer, which is basically a plugin that allows you to vectorize data based off a raster dataset. So it basically allowed you to use a raster map, basically. It could be a new one, it could be a rather old one, and then the tool allowed you to trace either rivers, lines, rivers, contours, or even polygons. And I mean, when I was studying back then, and I had to do a lot of digitizing, especially topographic features like contour lines and rivers, and it took forever. But this tool made it so much easier because you basically set up a starting point and you literally used your mouse and traced along the line. You didn't need to create a vertice every, I don't know, a few meters or a few kilometers. You literally just traced along the line, and it was pretty good, pretty spot on, even though there were sometimes maybe labels or fonts going across, or the line was cut because another feature was drawn on top. It was pretty smart, and I was able to figure it out. And that was really interesting to see. And obviously the benefits, it saved heaps of time when you started digitizing. The other one that falls in the same category was MapFlow. And that was also kind of interesting. It was also able to digitize pretty much automatically. It was a bit different because I think from memory, it was like a cloud-based platform. So you had to upload an image. It could be like a satellite or aerial image or even an old map or a map. And then you had different options, whether you wanted to create vector data out of, vector data as in line, polygon, or points. And I think there were like different models. So for instance, building, if you're interested in digitizing building in a certain area, you literally pick that model, you hit run, and within a minute, you did get a message and you were able to download a brand new data set. And it was pretty spot on. Sometimes it was even able to provide you other attributes like, the category of the building, whether it was a commercial or industrial, and also building heights. So that was pretty interesting. However, every time when you run a process like this, and this is kind of a standard process, you definitely have to double check your work because you can't trust it. Because you don't know what kind of source the tool is actually using in the background. So, this is actually one of the things where you go like, oh, it would be good to have a bit more transparency to know what data is actually running in the background and what sources the tool is using in the background, because the user doesn't know, and sometimes the tool, they don't mention that at all.
Mike, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something there?
I guess, the tools that Pierre's talking about, I think that feature extraction, these plugins that allow us to, which are really based on machine learning and, can do this assorted feature extraction. It's just such a powerful thing. If we can train up these tools on certain imagery to extract, whatever features we need, just by supplying these, algorithms with, just imagery, it completely transforms, the way that before digital capture in the past, where people are taking aerial photographs and you're capturing all this vector information. And now we're at this point where we can potentially just push the imagery through these algorithms and spit out all this vector data. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it's amazing. So typically when I've thought about this, I've thought about almost like an industrial data pipeline where terabytes of data are streaming down from satellites, and people are doing exactly this, running it through models because no human eyes are ever going to look at this stuff. And we see these huge machine-generated data sets. Like if you go to the Overture Maps Foundation and these building data sets, this is exactly how they've been made. A couple of questions here, though. One is, how did you both feel in your data to somebody else's server, which my guess is you don't know where it is. And maybe in your examples, it wasn't sensitive. But so that's the first question. And the second question is, how well did it do? Did you try it in different areas? So did you go to, I don't know, Cambodia? Did you go to Nicaragua? My guess is you didn't go to those two places and try this, running the same process. What do you think might have happened if you did? So 2 questions there. Where do you want to start? Pierre, let's start with you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, to be honest, I think that was one of the tools. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it might have been Mapflow. That's actually from a developer in Russia. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. But I obviously gave it a go. I mean, I had some sample data. But just in general, I mean, where do you stop and where do you start? We use cloud services pretty much on a daily basis, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And what do? You either use it or you don't. I mean, there's obviously some bad guys out there, I guess. But some people might say, oh, do your due diligence and test it and check them out first. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Me personally, I think it would depend on the data that I was using. Like the data would decide. If I'm just testing something, well, who cares? If it's the same kind of information someone could get off Google Earth, for example, I wouldn't be that worried about it. If it was super sensitive for the client that I was working on, I'd probably approach it differently. Yeah, so that would be my take on it. Mike, what is your guess on what would happen if you tried to run some of these models in vastly different landscapes?
Yeah, I was speaking about the plugin that I was using, Deepness, which probably similar to Mapflow and sort of the machine learning plugin. In fact, it came under that sort of neural network category, didn't it? Yeah, which to me just seems like sort of applied machine learning. Yeah, Deepness was, I think the sample data was done in Poland. So, yeah, look, I didn't have enough time to, really run it through its paces. I ran it over a little part of Ponsonby. I think you mispronounced that in the presentation, Pierre. Was it Ponsonby? But, the results weren't too bad. And you could see, with aerial photography over urban areas, you could see in terms of a machine learning algorithm, it's not going to take too much to be able to, extract building footprints and, potentially classify residential against semi-industrial and pick up lake features. And so whether an urban environment across the world would look quite similar, you might have sort of better results in those areas. A lot would depend on, almost the color balancing of that aerial photography and ensuring you're getting, just good, clean aerial photography. I mean, we know looking at even something like Google Earth, you've got a lot of that imagery is stitched together and the color balancing between, even just looking at Australia or New Zealand, you'll see it's not perfect right across. So whatever you're going to feed into that machine really is garbage in, garbage out type thing. But yeah, I think it's pretty hard to get consistent results across diverse landscapes, Dan, I think.
Yeah, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah. With Deepness in particular, I think you are also able to create your own model. And I think the sample data they used, that was like you said, Michael, that was for somewhere in Poland, or I don't know whether they covered the whole country of Poland or maybe just a part of it. But I remember that you could also create your own model and apply it to different parts of the world. But I agree. I mean, the test we ran on, I think we did it also Auckland University. It wasn't actually too bad, and also comes down on the resolution, does it? If you want to have really good results, then you might want to think of creating your own model. But if it's kind of a medium to large kind of resolution, that might still work, or at least it gives you a good head start. It does the bulk of the work, and then you just keep editing and change it and update the data as you go.
I haven't actually used Deepness myself, but I'm sure I have seen a YouTube video about it where you could go to a repository and choose different models for different things, download them locally to your computer and run these models against your data set. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Dan. Yeah, you've got, what is it? The zoo, I think it's called, the deepness zoo. But you've got a whole pile of these, but it's a neural network format. And so you've actually got a URL where you can go and download all these different models which have been tested in different environments. So, you just remembered about that.
Yeah, cool. I was just going to say before we move on, I was recently talking to the good people at the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and they are experimenting with this idea of, well, I guess it's not so much an idea anymore. They can do it of flying a lot of different kinds of drones over a huge urban environment and then stitching all that data together and then creating their own models designed just for that environment to extract buildings or to extract whatever, waterways, streets, that kind of thing. And their idea is that they're going to try and create this kind of zoo environment that you're just talking about, Mike, where people can train their own models and upload them, and eventually they'll have a library of models. So, oh, you're looking for houses in Zimbabwe. Here, this is for you. Oh, you're doing vegetation extraction, looking for trees in New York City. This one is for you. And I think it's really fascinating that we've got to that stage where we're going to have libraries or have already libraries of these things available. And even more fascinating is that they can now run on locally. Incredible.
It can only get better.
Yes. I remember the format. I think it was Onyx format.
Onyx format. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, that's right. And you can do things like image segmentation, feature detection, and land cover classification. And I remember we did that, and I don't know, Mike, you probably remember too, Erdős Imagine, where we pretty much did something similar. So we had our own model created and basically selected raster pixels in a different range of color and said, okay, well, that range is forest, this range is kind of water. And then we ran the process. This is obviously now more advanced. That makes it a lot easier.
I remember doing that, like drawing polygons saying, this is my pixel signature lake for forest, going from there. I think that, yeah, it sounds like things have moved on a lot from there. Right. So what's the next set of plugins we're talking about?
Okay, so the last one or the last category we looked at was LLMs, and that was absolutely mind-blowing. And there were two actually we were looking at, and they pretty much did things similar. The first one was I know, and the other one was called You, I believe. So this is really interesting, especially for people who never touched GIS before or not really familiar with any processes in the GIS world when you open up, for instance, QGIS, because what those tools allow you to have basically a natural conversation. So you talk to it and you say, download building data for Auckland. And it literally did it in front of your eyes. And it put it in the layers as well. And then once you had those layers set up in your layer browser, you were also able to classify the building by their building type and visualize it and give me different colors. And then voila, in a few seconds, it literally did it. And then you can also go the next step and, while you downloaded maybe other, like let's say suburb data and say, look, select all the buildings that are part of suburb XYZ. So you could do a simple intersection query. Obviously, that helps heaps and makes the process a lot quicker and faster. And especially for people who never touched it, because I had a conversation with someone. I was working with a client and there was a manager and he said, look, Pierre, can you teach me QGIS? I'd like to do exactly that or something similar. And I thought, gee, that would be the perfect tool for that person because he didn't know how to do it within QGIS. He would just need to talk to Q or I know, and it would literally do it for him.
Just a couple of questions there. I want to get your take on this in just a minute. Missing chains B. So like intersection is one thing, but would it work also if you you need to transform this data first? You need to, I don't know, show me all that, like create centroids from these polygons, reproject them, and then tell me which ones land within this polygon over here. Would it handle something like that?
As far as we understood, when we looked at those tools, it felt like whatever geoprocessing tools you have available in QGIS, whether it's intersecting or doing centroids or doing donuts or cutout features, like on top of other features, it would literally do it for you.
And did it create a whole bunch of temporary files, or did it just Like, yeah, at the end of the process, it created a file and put it in the layer browser.
So as soon as you prompted it, you could actually see its process. So it said, I'm doing this, I'm opening up this database. So you could actually follow through the whole process. And at the end, it spit out just the results.
That's really interesting. Or if you could save those results, they could be the standard operating procedures, right? They could start form the basis of like a how-to guide for, quote unquote normal people. Here's a bunch of prompts, right? Here's a prompt library. You want to do this? Here you go. Interesting. Do you experiment with this, Mike?
Yeah, I actually spent quite a bit of time in Q. I actually not sure if you paid your subscription, Pierre, but I ended up going and paid $19 a month for about the best part of 6 months, I think, $90 US, that is. And actually talked to both Brendan and Michael from Bunting Labs, who were the founders of Q. I just think it's just a great, fantastic tool. And yeah, just as Pierre was mentioning, you can go ahead and ask it what to do, and it will do a multi-step process. So if you're going to tell it to intersect a couple of layers and then work out the length of a line feature, it can do a multi-step process, and it will actually detail what it's doing as it goes. I guess the real constraints. Well, for Q, it's I guess the QGIS Python library, and also I think it's got a SQL database in the background, or it has all the I think it uses DuckDB for its SQL language. But yeah, the constraints are really that underlying programming. It seems like magic, but it's still, it does have its limitations. But it is incredible.
Which are the constraints you have anyway, right? If you're pushing buttons and you're constrained by which buttons you can push, which dialogues you have access to. So you're always constrained by that. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. It's also a constraint when we're communicating through a large language model. Was there any part of you, Mike, that looked at this and said, holy shit, my skills are obsolete, or this is going to take over the world?
Look, well, I mean, I think we're still in that stage, just coming back to what you said before, Dan, about almost having a prompt library. I mean, that's, if you could give that to people for using a large language model with GIS, that'd be perfect. I think we're still at that time where, we're actually needing to prompt the machine. It still requires us to input the information for it to work. But that knowledge that I would have had with either QGIS or the ArcGIS suite of products, where I knew exactly where everything was, I mean, thinking, all the experience that I've built up over those years, now I know the software inside out, that is soon to be irrelevant, because everything is just at your fingertips anyway, because you've got AI. There's just quicker ways to do it. But I think, there's still that when you're a junior coming into the industry, or if you're just a layperson using the GIS tools, there still is that somewhat of a barrier in terms of the terminology that you use. You still need to know your intersections, your spatial joins, and, whatever the GIS vernacular is. So, maybe the next step is developing those large language models to, really just be able to understand common English. But I think, you still need to be able to prompt properly. That having that prompt library could be amazing.
Yeah. In terms of feeling obsolete, I guess it depends on how you see your job. If your job is to know where all of the buttons on ArcGIS are and QGIS are and exactly what they do, well, yeah, you might feel in danger, right? But if your job is to enable other people and to guide them, support them, then I think things probably just got a lot easier. And you're just going to have a bigger group of people to work with.
AI's here to stay.
Pierre, could you imagine like large sort of swaths of the QGIS interface disappearing and just having a chat?
Yeah, I think we're still far away from that, but I can definitely envision that, in a few years, probably, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell. Technology advances so quickly, maybe 10, 20 years, you're just talking to a thing. It might not even the computer we know of today. It might be something totally different, a totally new interface. I mean, sometimes, I think of, look at Star Trek. They just talk to a computer. and they just know how to prompt it. They just say, "Hey, computer," and then it answers. And I guess that's where we're heading to, aren't we? Like, that's how it feels like.
Yeah.
And it could be a glass, it could be, any other interface. It doesn't need to be that box we're sitting in front of a desk every day.
Yeah. So a long time ago, I remember talking to someone and they were telling me about this idea of pervasive computing, where it was just computing was everywhere. It was built into the very fabric of our everyday lives. And so why not? Like, why not live in that universe? And I know for myself, it is so much more efficient talking to my computer than it is writing. Like, I can talk way faster and give the thing way more context than I ever can writing. And it's amazing at figuring it out. I make a lot of mistakes. It doesn't matter, but it gets more context and I get a better job done. I get a better result simply from pushing the Windows H button. A little microphone thing pops up on my computer. I talk at it. I say, stop, done. It figures it out. It's really incredible. Mike, so I know that you two have been playing around with a lot of different tools as well. Where else are you using AI in terms of your sort of professional work? What other tools are you working with, or what other use cases are you finding for this kind of thing?
I've also got a subscription to ChatGPT, which I think is essential in today's world. And at work, I'm using Copilot. But I find, outside the GIS realm, I've certainly been using those two models, GPT models. Yeah, I've been using them pretty much on an hourly basis. I find at work, I'm just constantly asking questions. If I need to know something about talking to the mainstream software here, whether it's FME or GIS, it's just a simple prompt question, and you just get all this material. I mean, the scary thing, which I think we'd all probably agree on, is just taking it so literally. And I find I've got to catch myself a lot of the time because it's still not always right. I am, very much sold on it. And I use it as a tool. It just does things so much more quickly than I can do it. So a lot of the information that comes out of a single prompt, there's some really good stuff in there. I mean, that's probably two. I've also been using a lot of Google Notebooks as well, which I've found that's excellent as well.
Yeah. Pierre? Notebook LM? I think that's what you're talking about, Mike.
That's right. Notebook LM.
Have you been playing with that as well, Pierre?
Yeah, just recently I've just come across Notebook LM and I thought, oh, that's incredible, because that's a great tool. I don't know whether your audience, well, some of you know Notebook LM, so you basically can train it with your own content. So you upload or you link it to a video, or you upload a presentation or a document, and it just filters through your sources depending what you want to do. Just to give you an example, even if you have different quotes for a certain product you're looking at, I recently just uploaded all my different quotes and it just figured out which one is actually the best and read even the fine print, which we usually don't. And it gave me some idea, and I realized, oh, okay, well, this product has 5 years more warranty than the others, which was, hidden in the fine print. And also it was able to provide you like audio outputs if you want to learn something about a certain topic. So you can actually feed it with a certain topic and it creates you an audio output like a podcast, and you just listen to it during the day and learn while you're driving to work, which is incredible. And the other tools I'm using, I mean, I was playing also with AI Studio, started mucking around with creating my own agents. So that's a specific AI that helps me, I don't know, collating some news or going through some of my medical records, and I was able to create charts, and it was going through and it gave me some insights on my results, which was quite interesting to see. And also scripting at work. Like, I'm not a coder. And in the past, I was always going to my coding experts and ask it, look, this is what I have. This is where I'm going to just create a Python script. I don't need to do that anymore. I just do it myself. I just give it the prompt, and 99% I get really good results. Sometimes I have to tweak it a little bit because it's not always right, but I get my work done so much quicker now. Or I just look up workflows. I get a task, say, for doing a certain analysis, and I just ask it, what's the best approach? And it spits me out dot points, and then I can action them either in like an ETL software, or I do it manually in QGIS or ArcPro. And also, given that English is not my native tongue, I use it also for writing emails. So I start writing usually, and then I ask it, look, rewrite it and make it more precise, and makes it so much easier nowadays.
I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and hear us talking about this and going, oh, you've given up. You've handed over all of your expertise and agency to the agents. They're doing all the work. You're not using your own brain. But I'd push back on this and I'd say a tool like Notebook LM, you can treat it as an answer engine if you want, and just say, ask it questions, it gives you the answer, and you can follow it blindly. You can do that with any LLM. Or you can treat it as a tutor, like the best tutor, the most patient tutor in the world that can communicate with you through text, through podcasts. It could create a video for you. If you want a visual understanding, a visual storybook, it can do that too. And even in that podcast function, if you click on that edit button, go in there, you can push interrupt and jump into the podcast. The two hosts, the male and female hosts, will invite you in. You can ask them a question and you can have a live conversation, quote unquote, live conversation with them. So just for the listeners, yes, this can be an answer engine. You can give away all of your agency and let the machine take over, or you can use it as a way of learning pretty much anything you want to learn in any way you want to learn it and at the speed you want to learn it. It's really amazing.
I agree, Dan. I see it also as a tool. And remember when the internet came to life, everyone thought, geez, people start copying stuff. They're too lazy going into the libraries and, looking at books and doing the studies properly. The internet was also just a tool, and it made life so much easier, and we did get stuff done a lot quicker and more efficient. And this is just the next iteration of the internet.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, yeah. It's like this would only be possible it was only possible because of the internet. I just want to take the conversation a slightly different track now. And maybe Mike, if you want, you can have a first crack at this question. So we've been talking a lot about processing, doing things like a transactional process. I'm trying to get from here to there. I want to learn this. What's the answer to that? What is the process I need to follow? What's the recipe? What's the processing chain in QGIS? Have either of you experimented with trying to make a beautiful map using AI?
I could take that one, Dan, because, actually, look, I think probably speak for Pierre as well here. We both love our cartography. When I think, I guess you're probably looking at, using possibly ChatGPT image generators, produce these maps. But I'd almost bring it back to process. I love using QGIS for cartography. I'll probably start paying for my subscription to Q again, but I'd like to be able to use these LLMs to actually produce beautiful maps. But in terms of, what those cartographic products look like, I'd probably still have the control over how that looks. But if I can generate those maps in a more expeditious manner or at a higher volume, I'll be using something like Q, a large language model to do that. Yeah, using AI just to push out a map, solely from a prompt. I haven't explored that. How about you, Pierre?
No, I haven't explored that either. And I was working for a mapping company in Australia called HEMA Maps, and we were always trying to do the labeling a lot more efficient. And we noticed rather quickly that, especially with the maps HEMA was creating at the time and still do, they have so much content there. The engine wasn't able to label it properly. So there was always someone, a cartographer ideally, who had a good eye for labeling, who needed to place those labels. And sometimes, you needed to adjust the font slightly or you rotate it slightly just to make it fit. And also, just to give you another example, Birdsville is a rather small town in Australia, and it's in the outback area, but it's the gateway to the Simpson Deserts. So it's a rather important town. And usually important, towns are labeled by their population, but birds will, how many live in Birdsville? I don't know, 500,000. So it's a rather small label if you do it programmatically or, with the underlying data. But because it's such an important place, you'd rather label it slightly bigger because, it's important. People need to know, where is Birdsville? How do I get and can cross the Simpson Deserts going from Birdsville? So yeah, that's, I don't know. I mean, maybe at some point AI is smart enough to do that, but at the moment I don't see that happening.
I think it's fascinating because a while ago, the argument was like, everyone's still going to have jobs because AI doesn't have any taste and it's not creative. It's just pattern recognition. I would push strongly back on that. I think it's incredibly creative. I don't know if either of you have played with something called Nano Banana from Google, image generation. It's not just a little bit incredible, it is unbelievable what this thing can do. And some of the latest stuff around video generation, given admittedly it's short videos, maybe a minute long, it's incredible how creative it is. And we're starting to talk about how world models, so you can see the way people move at the start. So a few years ago, there was this little video clip of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and his face was disappearing, and the spaghetti was going through his face and his head, and his hand was falling off, and he had 6 fingers and all that kind of thing. It's not like that anymore. It is not like that anymore, and it's getting so difficult to tell what is AI and what's not AI. And yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, I wouldn't be at all surprised if AI turns out to be an amazing cartographer. When I look at the way it designs websites, for example, just your stock standard Claude code, I do a lot with websites. I don't have any sort of understanding of design at all, nothing. If I just say clean and modern, it does a great job. Like, it's not an outstanding website because my prompt is also not outstanding, but it's good enough. Like, and I'm not going to let sort of perfection get in the way of good enough. And it is good enough. And my guess is when we have the tools to connect it to the cartographic engine of QGIS, I think it'll be good enough as well for a lot of situations.
I agree with you to an extent. It's all based on the data, isn't it? That's underpinning QGIS. I can see AI is so creative, but when it comes to cartography, yes, we can have, mapping that has, an artistic flair to it. But if we sort of want accuracy and precision, you've got that data underneath. But in terms of just asking ChatGPT to come up with a map and giving it a few prompts, I still can't see the accuracy of these maps being produced.
Well, I would say like the accuracy, I could see more misleading because if the underlying data is accurate, if the road is here and the road is accurate to X number of millimeters, in terms of accuracy against the real world, well, that's always going to be accurate. I don't think it's going to move that anywhere else. But I think it could be misleading. You know what I mean? Like, not maybe the road is shown in a different thickness that is, we're talking about the population of the town before. And if you're talking about that kind of accurate, it's not accurate. The town is more important than what the population suggests. So I get that side of it. But I think as long as the underlying data is accurate, I think accuracy in terms of geographic accuracy is not going to be a problem. It's going to be like accuracy in terms of, did you tell the story you were supposed to be telling? It's pretty easy to lie with maps. I think that is going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
Sure, if you prompt it and tell it not to distort the data, then it's probably going to be accurate.
Yeah, that's right. It probably comes down to the way you prompt it, don't you? Like, I mean, let's say if you have really high accuracy data, you load it into QGIS and you create a map as a starting point. And then maybe on top of that, you tell it, make it, I don't know, medieval map look like, or like let it make it look like an underworld or underwater world look like or something, but keep the accuracy or something, and keep in mind that that particular town is really important, so that needs to be visually legible on the map. Yeah, could be both. Could be of both worlds, accuracy and parts of AI or LLMs.
So there's a company called Scribble Maps. I talk with the founder quite often. Fascinating guy. Always playing around with something. And recently, I can't remember the life of me what he's called, but he's come up with this agent. So it's in his Scribble Maps thing. And what it can do is it looks at, let's say, Google Earth, it looks at an image and says, okay, those are buildings. Yep. And then you can say, create me a world that looks like, I don't know, Harry Potter in this section. And look at the image. It'll only create, Harry Potter style buildings where the other buildings are. It'll keep the roads where they are. And it's absolutely fascinating. And he can do things like, okay, these are all streetlights here. Show me what this would look like, where the streetlights would be shining their light if it was dark. It's incredible. Like, do you know what I mean? It's generating it. It's not based on, I don't know what physics it's using in the background, but you can see the streetlights shining down. I'm sure if you could change the angle on them, and it gives you an idea of like, oh, what bits are illuminated in the evening and what bits aren't. It's incredible what he can do. That being said, I think we're also moving into that time where it's getting harder and harder to separate fact from fiction, and we're going to see some interesting maps coming out in the future. I'm pretty sure of that. Maybe we should round off the conversation here a little bit, and I'd be curious to know what advice you would give to people in the industry, like to other GIS consultants, geospatial professionals. What would you say to them, Mike?
Well, I think in terms of AI, for a young professional, you've really got to just embrace it. I mean, it is to me, it's just the biggest transformation in probably the GIS industry. So it's probably internet mapping, but I mean it's massive, and you really need to just be trying to use it as much as you can. Look, I'm in the twilight of my career. Pierre's a lot younger than me, so he doesn't have to worry about this at the moment. But you really just want to get involved with it. You want to be, trying to use it in pretty much every software that you can. I think there's deep learning in ArcGIS Pro. Plus, they do have the beta AI assistant. So for our audiences, mainstream users, you want to see what offerings Esri has. FME also has an AI assist now. I'm not sure how well utilized it's been or how many people are using that. As far as for such an involved software, that FME is, from my perspective, seems to be lagging some of its other counterparts. Yeah, just try and just use it wherever you can in your workflows, whether it's with your cartography, whether it's with your geoprocessing, whether it's with your image analysis. Just try and use it as much as you can.
Yeah, what would you say to professionals in the geospatial world?
I agree exactly what Mike was saying. I would also say, use it as much as you can and try to make it part of your workflow and daily work. But I found that interesting quote I used for the presentation, and I was on the first slide. It's saying, AI is like a new intern, fast, enthusiastic, and sometimes completely wrong. So my advice here is check the results. You can't just trust it blindly. And I mentioned that before, that's part of our workflow as a GIS specialist anyway. You want to test your results, and you don't want to trust them blindly.
If I may, that sounds like the kind of advice that a lecturer would have given me when I was at university regarding referencing Wikipedia. It's like, yeah, it might point you in the right direction, but you need to check and back it up. And now my guess is Wikipedia is widely regarded as an authoritative source of data and information. It's interesting to think like, oh, maybe that's still where we are with LLMs as well. You need to check it. You need to follow up. A lot of the systems, a lot of the processes are completely opaque. We have no idea what's going on, but we need to do our best to figure it out. And for our own professionalism, make sure that we're not handing crap over to our clients. Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time. I hope to see you around.
Thanks very much, Dan.